Welcome to the Go Big and Go Home show. My name's Dustin Hill, and I'm here to help you discover and stick to your dreams while deepening the connections with those you love. Hey, it's Dustin Hill, host of the Go Big and Go Home show. Welcome back. I'm super excited to have you here. And today I want to talk about death. Now, you may be saying, Dustin, why are you talking about death? Like, you just started your podcast. Is it already dying or what? That's definitely not the case. But, I want to talk about death because it can be really, really powerful. So, Prince EA, he recently spoke in a group that I'm in, and I heard him talk about this and how you can use death as motivation, right? And so before we kind of get into that, I just want to tell a story. So when I was back in Texas, so we lived in Texas for a few years. We were in Austin, and then we lived in Pflugerville. I thought it was really funny because the name is PFLU, like that's how you spell it. And I remember we were looking at a map, and we're like, is it like Pflugerville? Like, we were just joking that our kids, when we moved there, they're going to be like, oh, it's like Pflugerville, And anyway, so we lived there for a few years. I was there at GM as a software engineer. And, I love my time there, and I'm very grateful for all that I was able to do. I moved into the mobile development space specifically for iOS. And so it was great. But I realized that it wasn't the place for me, and I wanted to look around. And so I ended up, my buddy, he was there, Jeff Perry, shout out to you, bro. And so he ended up going to Pullman, Washington, and I reached out to him about a letter of reference, so I reached out to him, and then he ended up, long story short, I ended up getting a job up there in Pullman, Washington. So it's like 30 hours away, super far. And the previous summer we had gone, or I guess it was around that time, we'd actually gone up to visit, my friend Jeff and Robin. And so it was really funny because then he kind of roped me into just doing an interview, and it just turned out that, hey, it just worked out. So it was really funny. But anyway, so we packed up our things, right? We have this big old Penske truck, those huge yellow ones. Sometimes you see them in the Marvel movies. I do in particular because, I'll tell you why I remember Penske so much now. But, so we're in Pflugerville, we loaded up the truck, and, we had some friends come and help load it up, and there's just tons of stuff. Obviously, you got your beds and you got your couch and all that stuff in there. It's jam packed. And I remember when we picked up the truck and it was empty, that it was like the brakes were kind of touchy. It was like a brand new truck. The tires were chock full of air, brand new tires. I think it had like 5,000 miles on it. Before I, picked it up, you had to pay for it. And, they asked if you want the insurance, and it's like a couple $100 more. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah, let's just do it. We're going quite a ways, and, it would be good to have, right? We'll just do it. So anyways, I didn't think too much of it, but, we're on the road, right? So my father-in-law came down, and we are leaving, 8:00 in the morning, and we get in the truck, and now it's full, right? Which is a little bit easier to drive now because there's all this stuff. It's kind of meant to have stuff in it. And so we're pulling out of there. And so what we typically would do is we'd go on kind of a side highway. We wouldn't go on like the interstate, but more like there's a ton of roads in Texas that are, pretty high speed. And so there was one that we'd gone on quite a bit, and it was like 70 miles an hour. So like, hey, well, let's do that. So we go, west out of Austin. We're going to go through New Mexico, go through Arizona, go up through Utah, and then finally make it up to Washington, after we get through Idaho too, because we're actually moving to Moscow, Idaho. But anyway, so we're leaving Austin, and we're driving on these roads, and we didn't really think too much about it, but like now we're in this truck, and straight roads are a lot better than these kind of windy roads. And while there may have been some trucks on this road, it was pretty windy. And, we're probably 20 miles away from Austin, and we're going, down this highway, pretty good speed. And as we're coming up to this turn, there's like the fog line, like those white lines at the edge of the road. And so there's usually, like a car could pretty much go off of the road, right? And it's still kind of a road, right? Well, in this section, there's essentially no shoulder. Like the white line is at the very edge of the road. So right after that, it's gravel, and so we're coming up to this turn. And as I'm getting up there, I'm in the driver's seat. My father-in-law's sitting right next to me. We're, having a nice conversation. But as I'm getting up to this turn, my right tire slips off the road. So it slips off, and I don't keep going, but I want to get back on. So I turn the wheel to the left, bring the car back on, And then I noticed that we're going towards traffic. So there's 2 lanes on each side and we're going towards traffic on the other side. Luckily there's no cars, but still like we're going to be in the wrong lanes, right? And so I start to turn the wheel back, and I remember my father-in-law reaching out and just saying, no, because he knew that I was like turning it too much. Okay. So I was overcorrecting. And as I overcorrected, we were going through an intersection. So it's a curve with an intersection, and I am turning the wheel, overcorrecting. And so the car, the truck, it's going it's going straight. It ends up flipping all the way over to the driver's side, and then it slides off the road 70 feet. And at that moment, it's terrifying, right? Like it was insane. And I remember like people talk about like slow motion, or you see it in the movies, and it's like, oh, and it seriously was like slow motion just for a second. And then it's like back to normal. Like it all happened so fast, but I remember it so vividly that the car is falling down. I remember saying to my father-in-law, like as we're crashing, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Like I felt so bad that he was in there with me. Luckily, he didn't get hurt. But, so what happens is, again, my side hits the ground, slides off 70 feet. My shoulder hits the ground first. The reason I know it hits first is because that was the thing that hurt the most after that. But I hit the ground with my shoulder and my elbow. My head ends up hitting the ground as well. And I remember like laying there on the ground. I got my seatbelt on. My father-in-law, I'm looking up at him, and he's got his seatbelt and he's just hanging there. And, my pillow was in the room, in the, car for some reason. And it was down on the ground, all this blood everywhere. And it was crazy. Like it was crazy to see that and to like be in this daze where I'm like, I was totally conscious. I didn't get knocked out at all, but it was just like, what just happened? It just happened so fast. It was crazy. And so, I remember my father-in-law, he, was able to get his seatbelt out, and he's up there, reaching his arm out for me. So I, get my seatbelt off, I reach up for him, and we both climb out of the truck. Amazing that we could both climb out of the truck. It's just I feel so grateful that we could do that. And so there I am standing on the side of a truck, which has never happened before. This huge old Penske truck, and it's the biggest one that they had, and I remember standing up there, and I see my wife standing out there. She was in the minivan, in front of us. And I saw her just standing there, just this like look, this shock on her face that like, what just happened? This is crazy. And just looking at her in the eye, like I could tell that she was, feeling a lot of emotions right now, as you can imagine. And, and it was interesting too, from her perspective. So my sister-in-law came to help drive as well. So she was driving the van, and she, they were in front of us, luckily too, far enough ahead. And they, she ended up telling Amy, hey, like, I think the truck just tipped over. And she's like, nah, like my wife, Amy's just like, no, it didn't. And, sure enough, it did. They turned around, and, and then they park somewhat close to the truck and just run, like she runs up there to see me. And so, again, she's out there standing there waiting for me. I, climbed down the truck, and I remember walking past the truck and looking at it, it's on its side. There's like oil or gas or something like on the ground. And I'm like, oh man, like is something going to blow up? I mean, luckily nothing did or anything like that. But they brought me over to, next to a vent and sat me down. I remember my shirt, it was all, broken up. And so then the, EMTs are there, and they like rip off my sleeve, and they're checking it and making sure everything looks good. Nothing's too crazy. And again, like, it's just, I feel so grateful that it could have been so much worse. And so, what happens is, the ambulance comes, they put me in there, and they drive me back to Austin. So we're going back. We actually, I think, went to Round Rock, which is just north of Austin, north of Pflugerville. And so they take me back to the hospital, and I got to tell you, that day, like, I just relived that moment over and over and over again. And I cried like so much. It was pretty crazy. And, I remember talking to them in the ambulance, and they were, making sure that I was conscious. I had this big old neck brace on, and luckily, everything was fine with my neck. And, I get to the hospital and they check me out and see what's going on. And they, the doctor there we do like a CAT scan to make sure everything looks good in my brain. Everything is fine. And then ends up like I had this scrape on my elbow, in my head as well. And then my shoulder actually hurt the most. But it was okay. It was just a little scraped up. My elbow, we needed some staples in there. And then my head, I had to get some staples. And, I remember the doctor, like as he was putting them in, just telling me to say, I hate doctors, like putting in my head. I don't know if they like used anesthetic or anything. I honestly don't even know, but it was totally fine. And grateful for him for, helping me out. And one of the funniest things is later, he didn't really clean out my head too well. Like there was like, I found like blood and like pieces of glass later. And so it was really kind of funny. I was like, did you miss something? Like, is there still something in here? I don't even know. But anyways, it ended up being okay, but why do I tell you that? Right. Like we ended up getting to Pullman, and my dad actually flew out to Dallas. And so we ended up, going on this the interstate. So like, that was what we should have been doing the whole time. But, he ended up coming out, and he helped drive the truck, with my father-in-law. And so, grateful for them. And, we ended up making out there. So we took it easy. And I remember even during that trip, like it was hard for me to even like see the truck. Like that first time that I saw the truck again, I was just like, oh, just bad memories, right? And even if I remember watching a Marvel movie recently and there's like a Penske truck, and like seeing a Penske truck for everybody else is just like, oh, okay, it's a Penske truck. If I see a Penske truck, it's like, oh, wow, there's a lot of memories that I have. And luckily it's not like that same feeling, but again, pretty traumatizing and pretty crazy, and so, again, why do I talk about this? Why am I talking about death? And how does that relate to like what Prince EA was talking about, and the thing is, death is very interesting. And, I believe in God, and I believe that there is heaven, that we can live there after earth. But, the thing to me though, is that it's really like important for us to sometimes put things in perspective, right? Like if you think, a lot of us may think, okay, I don't know exactly how old you are, but maybe you're going to live 20, 30, 50 years. I don't know. And that's kind of what we expect, right? We kind of expect to grow old, but what if you don't? Like, what if you don't grow old? Like how would your life change if you knew that you only lived for like 5 years, right? If you knew that death was coming, what would you do differently? Right. And so I really want you to think about that, because, I think one of the first things for me that comes to mind is, am I truly taking care of my family? Right. And am I really close to them? Do I have the relationships that I want with them? Because if I put that off for 5 years, that's too bad, right? I'm gone and I lost out on that. And you look back on your life and you're like, yeah, okay, I was successful, or I made money, or just whatever, but I didn't have my family and I wasn't there for them. Like that is super important, obviously. And, if you're listening to that, I know that you agree with that. And sometimes it can be hard to do that, but that's, part of the purpose of this show is to help you to gain perspective on that. Like, yeah, okay, I can do this. Like I can make that a priority. Right. But the other thing too is like, let's say you're doing amazing at taking care of your family and those that you love. Like, are you doing what you're truly passionate about? Like, is that something that you wake up every day and you're like, yes, I'm like just super excited about the things that I get to do, and partially, one thing I want to help you with throughout this, podcast is that your, what you truly believe, in your mindset and really like how you react to things can make such a difference, right? Like I know that you can love, even maybe you don't love the thing that you're doing, but you can actually find a lot more joy. And that's something I recommend that you do no matter what. Even if you right now are like looking for that next thing, you want to, follow your dreams, like be grateful for what you have right now and do the very best that you can, because that will continue to give you the energy that you need to go forward, right? But I would ask you though too, like if you were going to be gone in 5 years, and let's say your family life is just perfect, you're doing amazing there, are you truly doing what you love? And if you're not, I would encourage you to think about, well, what is the thing that really gets me going? What is the thing I really want to do? And to start working towards that, right? And some of it may just be, hey, I just need to introduce a new hobby. I need to go running more. I need to run a marathon, like do something. But again, I really want you to find that thing. And just, again, death can really help us to put things in perspective, and for me, looking back on that accident, it is something that definitely puts things into perspective, right? Like there's certain things that just don't matter when you're in those type of situations. If you lose a loved one, then there's other things that just don't really matter, right? Like some of the little quarrels that we have with one another, these little fights that we have, like it's just like, why, like we just don't even think about that, right? And then but sometimes when we don't think about putting things in perspective, then we kind of forget. And so, I really hope that helps you to do that. And the last takeaway is just to get insurance, so I mean, that was the best like $200 I ever spent, because it saved me like 60 grand or something like that. And so definitely get insurance if you're going to move, just in case, because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. But again, I really just encourage you to take a minute to really think about, death for a second, right? Which sounds weird. I get it. Prince EA, when he talked about that, I was like, oh, that sounds so weird, but it really is. And it can give you motivation. The last thing that it can do, which Prince EA alluded to, is that, death can actually give you motivation, right? It totally can. But think about it. Like if you knew you're going to die in a year, like, would you be scared to do some of the things you want to? Like, oh, I want to do skydiving. Cool. Like, would you be scared anymore? I don't know. There's just certain things that really can help you to get the courage to go do that. And the one thing that I'll mention too is that Prince EA just talked about is that, it can really, before you do something, if you really think about, a bigger perspective, like putting the show together, it's like, I really want to impact lives and I want to help you in these ways at home and the thing that you love. Maybe that's your career, maybe that's starting a business, whatever that is. But like, if I can continue to channel that and like, I can envision changing your life, it's going to be so much easier for me to speak to you, right? Like 100% easier, unless I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me think about this cool, like, 3-step thing. And I'm sure I'll have plenty of those, but like, again, if it's not meant to really like help you, then it's harder, right? Whereas with, when you're doing something and you can really think about, well, what's the main thing? Like if this was my last message, this last thing that I could do, what would I do? And would it be good enough, right? That can really put things in perspective. And so thank you so much. Take a minute to think about death and how that might affect, your family life and your work or your business life and your dreams. And until next time, make sure that you go big and go home. Hey, it's Dustin, and I hope you got a lot of value out of this episode, and I also hope that you're already subscribed. If not, what are you waiting for? Go subscribe, rate, and review. That'll make sure that you get this content as soon as it comes out, and also make sure to share with your friends and family so that they can go big and go home just like you.